Hey there, friends. Tonight we're walking into a story about belief, the kind that burns quiet and steady in a person's chest for decades, the kind that refuses to die even when the entire educated world laughs in your face. You're about to stand beside a man who traded comfort for obsession, who saw a picture in a children's book and decided to tear open a Turkish hillside looking for gods and kings. The air smells like turned earth and Mediterranean thyme, and somewhere beneath your feet, if you listen carefully, bronze swords still dream in the darkness. Fair warning, you're about to spend a fortune on a hunch. Good thing this isn't your life, right? See, this isn't just about digging up old stones. This is about the moment when myth becomes geography, when poetry becomes archaeology, when the world has to swallow its certainty and admit that maybe, just maybe, the stories we told around fires for 3,000 years were trying to tell us something true. You'll hold gold that queens once wore. You'll make mistakes so catastrophic they'll echo through a century of scholarship. And you'll prove, despite everything, that Troy was real. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm curious, where are you listening from tonight? Drop your city and local time in the comments. I love knowing this story is reaching you in Tokyo at dawn, or London at midnight, or somewhere in the American Midwest where the cicadas are just starting their evening song. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are 7 years old. It is Christmas morning in 1829, and your father has just placed a book in your small hands. Ludwig Jehre's Illustrated History of the World. The leather binding is still warm from being near the fire. You open it carefully, the way children do with treasures, and there on the page is a city burning, Troy. The walls rise impossibly high, towers crowned with flame, and in the foreground, a man carries his father on his shoulders, while the Greek armies pour through shattered gates like floodwater. Your finger traces the engraved walls. They look so solid on the page, so real, not like fairy tale castles that float in clouds or shimmer in mirrors. These walls have thickness, they have gates, they have stones stacked by human hands. And in your 7-year-old heart, a question forms that will never quite leave you. If someone drew it this carefully, doesn't that mean it was really there? Papa, you ask, and your voice is small in the warm room. Did Troy really exist? Your father, a poor Protestant minister in the little German village of Neubucko. He smiles the way adults do when they're about to crush something without meaning to. It's just a story, Heinrich, he says gently. Homer made it up. Beautiful poetry, but only poetry. But you're looking at those walls. You're seeing the way the artist drew shadows beneath each stone block, the way smoke curls upward in careful grey lines. Someone thought about this. Someone imagined it real enough to measure it. And in the warm Christmas morning light, you make a decision that will eat 40 years of your life. You will find it. Someday, somehow, you will find Troy. The room smells like pine and candle wax. Your mother is cooking something in the kitchen. You can hear the gentle clatter of pots, the everyday sounds of a poor household where luxuries like illustrated books are rare as summer snow. Your father has already turned away, back to his own reading, but you're still staring at the page. The hero Aeneas carries his father Anchises. Behind them, everything they've ever known turns to ash and ember. And somewhere, you think, somewhere under dirt and grass and the forgetting of centuries, those walls are still standing. You don't know it yet, but this moment, this exact crystalline instant of belief, will cost you everything and give you more. It will drive you through poverty so grinding you'll forget the taste of full meals. It will push you through languages and continents, through fortunes made and spent, through the mockery of scholars who think Homer is merely beautiful lies. But right now, you're just a boy holding a book, and the walls of Troy are calling across time, whispering, "Find me, find me, find me." The fire crackles. Your father turns a page. Outside, snow is beginning to fall on the village, soft and silent, covering everything in white. And you slide the book under your arm, protective, possessive, already planning. Because some truths you're learning are too luminous to dismiss. Some stories insist on being found. Later, when you're supposed to be sleeping, you'll open that book again by candlelight. You'll study every detail of those walls. You'll memorize the towers, count the gates, trace the battle scenes in the margins, and you'll whisper into the darkness a promise that will shape your entire existence. I will prove you were real. The candle flickers. The house settles into its nighttime sounds. Wood beams cooling, wind against windows, your mother's soft footsteps in the hallway, checking on children. And in your small bed, in your small room, in your small village that will never be enough to contain what you're becoming, you hold that promise like a coal against your heart. 40 years, Heinrich. That's how long this hunger will simmer. That's how many winters will pass before you stand on Turkish soil with a shovel in your hands and Homer's words in your throat. But tonight, Christmas night, 1829, the journey begins here, in belief, in wonder, in the quiet certainty of a child who looked at a picture and refused to accept that beauty must be fiction. The walls of Troy are waiting. They've been waiting 3,000 years. They can wait a little longer. You are 18 now, and the dream tastes like pickled herring. Every day, for 18 hours a day, you stand behind a wooden counter in a grocer's shop in the tiny town of Fürstenberg. Your hands smell permanently of brine and wood oil. Your back aches from lifting sacks of grain. And in the rare moments between customers, when Herr Höchstädt isn't watching, you whisper lines from Homer under your breath, like prayers. Sing, O Muse, of the rage of Achilles. But the words barely form before another customer needs another pound of salt pork, another measure of flour. The shop is dark, even in daytime. Small windows, low ceiling, the perpetual gloom of a building that's seen 100 years of commercial transactions and will likely see 100 more. This is your life now. This is what poverty looks like when it wraps itself around a young man's throat and squeezes. You left school at 14. Your father's meagre salary couldn't stretch to feed all the children and pay for education too. So you went where poor German boys go, into apprenticeship, into labor, into the slow grinding machinery of working class existence. And Troy? Troy became the thing you think about at night, when your muscles finally stop aching enough to let you sleep. The other apprentice, a boy named Karl, he thinks you're peculiar. Sometimes he catches you murmuring Greek while weighing coffee beans, and he'll laugh. Not meanly, just confused. Why do you care about that old stuff? He asks, and you don't have an answer that would make sense to him. How do you explain that somewhere beneath Turkish soil, heroes sleep? How do you describe the specific weight of longing that comes from knowing something true that the entire world dismisses? So you just shrug and measure out another pound of sugar. But here's what they don't see, what they can't see. You're learning. Every pfennig you save goes toward language lessons when you can find them, toward borrowed books, toward the slow accumulation of knowledge that will someday, somehow, carry you out of this dim shop and onto sun-bleached excavation sites. You're teaching yourself English from newspapers. You're memorizing French verb conjugations while scrubbing floors. You're building an empire of grammar and vocabulary in the only space you truly own, your mind. One night, a Tuesday, you'll remember it always as Tuesday. A drunken miller comes into the shop after hours, pounding on the door until Herr Höchstädt lets him in. The man is swaying, barely upright, and he's reciting something in slurred, beautiful, ancient Greek. Your hands stop moving, your breath catches, because you recognize it. It's Homer, it's the Iliad. It's the passage where Hector says goodbye to his wife Andromache before going to die beneath Achilles' spear. The miller stumbles through 20 lines, maybe more, his words thick with beer, but the meter perfect, the ancient language rolling off his tongue like water over stones. And you're frozen behind the counter, tears streaming down your face, because this is the first time since childhood that you've heard someone speak these words aloud. The first time they've existed as sound instead of just silent symbols on borrowed pages. When the miller finishes, he laughs at your expression. You like the old stories, boy? You can only nod. They're just stories, he says, echoing your father, echoing everyone. Pretty lies from dead poets, but you're not listening anymore. You're remembering Christmas morning, the illustrated book, the walls that insisted on being real. And you're making another promise in the darkness of that grocer's shop. You will not spend your life weighing herrings. You will not die in a small town, unknown, with your dreams still locked in your chest like secrets too expensive to speak. Historians still argue whether this Miller story is embellished memory or literal truth. Schliemann told it so many times, each version slightly different. But the emotional truth is solid. In that moment, Troy stopped being abstract. It became necessary. It became the thing worth sacrificing everything to find. You're 18, and your hands smell like fish, and outside the shop window the German night is cold and starless. But inside your chest, something is burning that will never go out. Troy is calling. And one day, not today, not tomorrow, but one day, you will answer. You are standing in St. Petersburg, Russia, and you are finally, improbably, becoming rich. The year is 1854, and while most men would be horrified by war, you found a way to turn the Crimean conflict into your personal Troy fund. Your office overlooks the frozen Neva River, and on your desk sits a ledger filled with numbers that grow larger every week. Indigo, sulfur, saltpeter, lead. The materials of warfare, bought cheap and sold dear to a Russian army desperate for supplies. The path from that grocer's shop to this mahogany desk was not gentle. You worked as a cabin boy on a ship that wrecked off the Dutch coast. You nearly drowned in winter water. You spent years as a poorly paid bookkeeper in Amsterdam, eating potato peelings and sleeping in unheated rooms. You taught yourself 7 languages by reading newspapers aloud until landladies complained about the noise. And slowly, transaction by transaction, you climbed. Now you're a trader, and you're good at it. Unnervingly good. While other merchants worry about ethics and fair pricing, you've discovered something about yourself. When the goal is Troy, almost anything becomes permissible. Not theft, not cruelty, you have lines. But aggressive negotiation, taking advantage of wartime chaos, charging premium prices because armies have no choice. These things sit comfortably in your conscience because every ruble brings you closer to that Turkish hillside you've never stopped imagining. Your office is warm tonight. A porcelain stove radiates heat in the corner, and through the frost-etched window, you can see St. Petersburg's golden domes catching the last light of evening. You're 32 years old, and for the first time in your life, poverty isn't gnawing at your heels. You have money. Not just comfort money, excavation money. The kind of fortune that can hire workers, purchase land, bribe officials, and fund years of digging. You open a drawer and pull out a worn copy of Homer's Iliad. The Greek text, not a translation. You've owned this copy for 8 years now, carried it through a dozen cities, read it so many times the binding is cracked and pages are loose. Your finger finds a familiar passage, the description of Troy's walls, the Scaean Gate, the towers where Priam's sons kept watch. You read it aloud in ancient Greek, and the sounds feel holy in your mouth. Menin aide thea piliadeo Achilleos. Sing, O goddess, the rage of Achilles. A knock interrupts you. Your assistant, a nervous man named Piotr, enters with another contract. More sulfur, more profit, more golden rubles to stack against your dream. You sign without reading closely. You trust your own ruthlessness enough by now to know the terms are favorable. Will there be anything else, sir? Piotr asks. Tell me, you say suddenly, looking up. Do you believe Troy was real? He blinks, caught off guard. The city from the poems? Yes. I suppose I never thought about it, sir. Isn't it mythology? You smile, but there's no warmth in it. Everyone thinks that. Every educated person in Europe thinks that. Homer is considered beautiful fiction, epic poetry, metaphor. You tap the book on your desk. But I'm going to prove them wrong. Piotr clearly thinks you're eccentric. Rich people can afford eccentricity after all. But he nods politely and retreats, leaving you alone with your maps and your ledgers and your hunger. Here's something you don't tell people. You're not actually sure Troy exists. Not in your rational mind, the part that's so good at trading and negotiating and reading market conditions. That part of you acknowledges the possibility that the scholars are right, that Homer invented everything, that you might spend your fortune digging up empty hillsides while Europe laughs. But there's another part of you, the 7-year-old boy who saw those illustrated walls, and that part has never doubted, not for a single moment. So you'll keep trading. You'll keep accumulating wealth until you have enough to be absurd with. And then you'll point yourself at Turkey like an arrow at a target, and you'll dig until you find truth or run out of money, whichever comes first. Outside, snow begins to fall on St. Petersburg, soft and silent, covering the Baroque buildings in white. The Crimean War grinds on, consuming men and materials with mechanical efficiency. And you sit in your warm office, surrounded by the instruments of your enrichment, planning the most extravagant gamble of the 19th century. Historians still argue whether Schliemann's business practices were ethical. Some call him a war profiteer, others a shrewd trader. But tonight, in this frozen Russian city, none of that matters. What matters is that the boy from Neubuchol, the one who stood behind a grocer's counter dreaming of heroes, is finally becoming a man who can afford to chase ghosts. The walls of Troy are waiting, and you're almost ready to find them. You are standing on a dusty hillock in northwestern Turkey called Hisarlik, and the man beside you is smiling like someone who's been waiting years for you to finally arrive. His name is Frank Calvert. He's the British consul in the Dardanelles, and he's been digging here for 15 years with almost no money and absolutely no recognition. And he's about to give you the greatest gift anyone has ever offered, the location of Troy. It's 1868, and the afternoon sun is brutal, the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer and turns your clothes into damp, clinging membranes. You've spent the last decade becoming obscenely wealthy, California gold rush, then more trading, then shrewd investments that multiplied your fortune beyond what even you expected. You divorced your first wife, scandalously, wrote a doctoral dissertation in ancient Greek, naturally, and travelled the Mediterranean visiting every site mentioned in Homer. But this place, this unremarkable mound rising about 50 feet above the surrounding Turkish plain, this is where your journey finally focuses. Calvert is walking you around the hill, pointing out subtle features only an experienced eye would notice. See there, he says, gesturing to where a bit of worked stone juts from the earth. And there, that's part of a massive wall. I've been excavating on my half of the property, but I can't afford to purchase the entire site. The Turkish owner wants too much. You barely hear him. You're turning in place, looking at the landscape, matching it against words you've memorized so thoroughly they might as well be carved into your bones. To the west, the Aegean Sea glitters in the distance. To the north, the Dardanelles Strait, what Homer called the Hellespont, curves blue and ancient. And from this hilltop, you can see the whole plain where the Greeks supposedly camped for 10 years, where Achilles dragged Hector's body around the walls, where the Trojan horse was pulled through gates now buried under centuries of dirt. "This is it," you whisper. Calvert looks at you curiously. "You sound very certain." "Because I am." You crouch down, running your fingers through the soil. It's dry, powdery, studded with pottery shards that glint in the sunlight. "How deep have you excavated?" 30 feet in some places. The layers go down much further. I found 9 distinct strata, maybe more. Pottery styles change as you descend. This isn't one city, Schliemann. It's many cities, built one on top of another across thousands of years. Your heart is hammering. 9 cities. Troy reborn again and again, like a phoenix that couldn't quite give up its nest. Which layer is Homeric Troy? If it exists at all, Calvert shrugs. My guess would be one of the middle layers, but it's only a guess. Here's what you don't tell him. You don't care about guesses anymore. You've spent 40 years building toward this moment, and now that you're standing here, feeling the Turkish wind carry the scent of wild thyme and ancient dust, you know, not think, not hope, but know, that beneath your feet lies the city where Helen walked, where Priam ruled, where the greatest story ever told actually happened. You stand up, brushing dirt from your hands. "I'll buy the rest of the land from the Turkish owner, whatever he wants, and I'll need to hire workers. How many can you recommend?" Calvert blinks. You're serious? You're going to excavate the entire site?" "I'm going to excavate until I find Troy." He's quiet for a moment, studying your face. Then he says something you'll remember forever. Most archaeologists would approach this more carefully. Document everything, excavate slowly, preserve the stratigraphy. I'm not most archaeologists. "No," Calvert agrees, a slight edge in his voice. "You're certainly not." There's tension in that observation, a warning you're too excited to fully hear. Because Calvert knows what you don't yet understand. Archaeology isn't treasure hunting. It's patient, meticulous reconstruction of human life through layers of broken pottery and collapsed walls. It's respecting what you find, not just extracting the shiny bits. But you're Heinrich Schliemann, the boy who taught himself languages in a grocer's shop, the man who built a fortune from nothing, and patience has never been your virtue. The sun is setting now, painting Hisarlik in shades of amber and rose. From here, you can see farmers working distant fields, sheep dotting the hillsides, the everyday life of rural Turkey continuing as it has for centuries. None of them know what's about to happen. None of them realize that you're going to tear open this hill, like a surgeon opening a chest, looking for a heart that stopped beating 3,000 years ago. "When can we start?" you ask. Calvert laughs, but it's not quite a happy sound. "As soon as you want, I suppose. As soon as you buy the land." You shake his hand. His palm is rough with calluses from years of digging. Yours is softer, the hand of a merchant who's wielded pens more than pickaxes. But that's about to change. "Thank you, Frank," you say quietly, "for believing, for digging, for waiting." He nods, and in his eyes you see something complicated. Relief that someone with money is finally taking this seriously, but also apprehension, as if he knows that what you're about to do will be both miraculous and catastrophic. The two of you descend the hill as darkness gathers. Behind you, Hisarlik rises against the evening sky, patient, ancient, full of secrets it's kept for so long that even the grass growing on its slopes has forgotten what lies beneath. But you haven't forgotten. You've never forgotten. And tomorrow, or next week, or next month, you'll return with workers and tools and dynamite, and you'll make this hill confess everything it knows. Troy is waiting. It's been waiting since the Christmas morning when a 7-year-old boy saw an illustration and refused to believe it was only a story. And now, finally, the waiting is almost over. You're watching workers drive an enormous trench through the heart of Hisarlik, and the sound is like the earth screaming. It's 1871, and you've decided that the fastest way to reach Homeric Troy is to cut straight down through the hill, a 45-foot vertical slice from summit to base, wide enough for carts to descend. Pickaxes ring against stone, shovels bite into compacted earth, and every few days, when progress slows, you order charges of dynamite. The explosion you just set off sends a shudder through the ground that you feel in your teeth. Rocks and dirt shower outward. Somewhere in the cloud of dust and smoke, fragments of walls crumble. Walls built by people whose names you'll never know, whose cities you're destroying to find the one city you care about. But you tell yourself this is necessary. You tell yourself that Troy is buried deep, and every layer above it is simply in the way. Your workers, over 100 of them, Turkish peasants hired for minimal wages, they watch you with an expression you're learning to recognize. Not quite fear, not quite admiration, something closer to bewilderment at the sheer violence of your archaeology. One man crosses himself after each explosion, whispering prayers. Another, a boy no older than 15, asks you quietly why you're in such a hurry. Because I'm 50 years old, you tell him, though that's not quite true. You're 49, and I've waited my entire life for this. The boy nods, but you can see he doesn't understand. How could he? To him, this is just a hill, just dirt and rocks and old pottery shards. He doesn't carry the weight you carry, the decades of hunger and humiliation and certainty that brought you to this Turkish hillside with dynamite and dreams. You descend into the trench, your boots finding purchase on exposed walls and collapsed foundations. The sides tower above you now, a vertical slice through time, showing distinct layers of habitation. Here, about 15 feet down, is a band of darker earth studded with pottery painted in elegant geometric patterns. 20 feet down, the pottery changes style, cruder, thicker, older. And at the bottom of your growing excavation, stone foundations so massive they make your breath catch. Walls built from blocks that would take 4 men to lift. This is it, you whisper, running your hands over the stone. This has to be Priam's Troy. Your assistant, a German engineer named Adolf Laurel, he's less certain. Herr Schliemann, we don't know which layer corresponds to Homer's era. We're finding artifacts from many different periods. Look at these walls! You're almost shouting now, your voice echoing off the trench walls. Look at the size of them! This is fortress architecture. This is royal construction. This is... You stop mid-sentence because your hand has just touched something that isn't stone. Something smooth. You scrape away dirt with your fingers, heedless of the nails you're breaking, and reveal a curve of copper, green with age but unmistakably metal. A vessel of some kind, crushed by the weight of centuries. The next hours blur into obsessive excavation. You're down on your knees now, trowel in hand, carefully exposing what turns out to be a broken cooking pot. Not treasure, not gold, just a humble kitchen implement that someone used 3,000 years ago to boil lentils or heat water. But you lift it from the earth with trembling hands, because this pot, this ordinary broken pot, represents something more profound than you can articulate. Someone held this. Someone's hands, now dust, gripped these handles and stirred whatever bubbled inside. The workers take their evening meal break, and you sit alone in the deepening trench, holding that pot and feeling the full weight of what you're doing. Above you, 45 feet of excavated history rises in stratified layers. How many pots like this have you destroyed to get here? How many walls have you dynamited? How many houses collapsed? How many lives, ancient, precious, irreplaceable, have you obliterated in your rush toward the one life that matters to you? Frank Calvert visits that evening. You show him the Great Trench with pride, expecting admiration. Instead, his face goes carefully neutral. Heinrich, he says slowly, you're destroying the upper layers before documenting them. Future archaeologists will never know what was here. The upper layers aren't Troy. But they're still human history. They're still valuable. I didn't come here for valuable. I came here for Troy. The silence between you is heavy with mutual incomprehension. Calvert sees a scientific tragedy, the methodical destruction of an irreplaceable archaeological site. You see necessary sacrifice, the clearing of obstacles between you and vindication. Historians still argue about which of you is right. Both of you, probably. And neither. That night, you sit in your tent writing in your journal by lamplight. The entry is triumphant, detailing the great walls you've exposed, the pottery, the progress. You don't mention the dynamite. You don't mention Calvert's disapproval. You don't mention the creeping suspicion, quickly suppressed, that perhaps you're going about this wrong. Instead, you write, soon, very soon now, Troy will speak. Outside, the Turkish night is soft with cricket song. The sea wind carries the scent of salt and thyme, and in the great wound you've carved through Hisalik's heart, darkness pools like ancient blood, waiting for morning when you'll resume your violent excavation. The walls of Troy are emerging, not gently, not carefully, but emerging nonetheless, torn from the earth by force and faith and the burning certainty of a man who learned as a child that some truths are too important to treat with caution. Tomorrow you'll use more dynamite, you'll excavate deeper, and one day soon, you can feel it like a storm gathering on the horizon. You'll find something that will make the entire world admit you were right all along. You are standing in a trench at 7 o'clock on a June morning in 1873, and you've just glimpsed something golden gleaming in the dirt. Your heart stops. Then it starts again, beating so hard you can hear blood rushing in your ears. Because, unless you're hallucinating from heat and exhaustion and 2 years of relentless excavation, you're looking at treasure. The morning light is still soft, slanting into the deep excavation where yesterday's work exposed a section of wall. You were walking past when something caught your eye. A tiny edge of metal, bright against the dark earth. You stop, you crouch, and you see it. Not just one piece, but many, packed together as if someone hurriedly buried them 3,000 years ago, when Greek soldiers were pouring through the gates. Your wife, Sophia, is somewhere up above, supervising the breakfast for workers. The 100 Turkish laborers you employ will arrive within the hour, ready to continue the systematic excavation. But if they see this, if anyone sees this, the treasure will disappear into dozens of pockets, will be scattered and sold and lost before you can document or study or claim it. So you do something that will haunt your reputation for the next century. You lie. You climb out of the trench, find your foreman, and announce cheerfully, "Today is my birthday. We'll take a holiday. Send the men home with full pay." The foreman blinks in surprise but doesn't argue. Soon the workers are dispersing across the Turkish countryside, pockets jingling with unexpected coins, pleased by their generous German employer. And you grab Sophia, a basket and a knife, and you descend back into that trench like thieves.
Heinrich, what? Look.
You point at the glint of gold. Sophia's eyes go wide. You've married well this second time, a young Greek woman who shares your obsession with Homer, who's learned archaeology at your side, who won't hesitate now when you need her most. She drops to her knees beside you, and together you begin the most frantic, most consequential excavation of your career. The first piece you extract is a copper cauldron, then another, silver vases, bronze weapons, and then, oh God, then, gold. Gold diadems, gold necklaces, gold cups worked in elaborate patterns. You're scraping away dirt with your bare hands now, heedless of the ancient wall looming above you, unstable, threatening to collapse. Stones are already falling, small ones at first, pebbles dislodged by your digging. But you don't stop. You can't stop. Heinrich, the wall! I see it. Keep digging. A larger stone crashes down inches from Sophia's head. She doesn't flinch. She's as deep into the fever as you are now, this desperate hunger to possess what you found before the earth reclaims it or some disaster intervenes. You're excavating without method, without documentation, just grabbing everything you can reach and shoving it into the basket. Artifacts that should be photographed in situ, measured, catalogued, but you're treating them like pirates dividing loot. More stones fall. The wall is definitely unstable now, threatening to bury both of you in a collapse that would be grimly ironic. Killed by Trojan walls while stealing Trojan treasure. But finally, you reach the bottom of the cache. Your hands close around the last object, a gold source boat, its handle shaped like a serpent, and you and Sophia scramble out of the trench seconds before a whole section of ancient masonry crashes down exactly where you were kneeling. You're both breathing hard, your hands are bleeding, and between you sits a basket containing 8,000 individual pieces of gold and precious metal. Back in your house, with the doors locked and curtains drawn, you spread the treasure across a table. The gold catches lamplight and throws it back in warm, honey-coloured gleams. There are diadems, elaborate headdresses made of thousands of tiny gold rings linked together, meant to drape across a queen's forehead and temples. There are earrings in the shape of flowers. There are 6 silver knife blades. There are boblets and plates and mysterious objects whose original purpose you can only guess. Sophia picks up the largest diadem. It's heavy in her hands, complex, beautiful in a way that makes your chest ache. Is this Priam's treasure, you whisper? Helen's jewels, the wealth of Troy. You're both silent, staring at the hoard that represents vindication beyond your wildest imaginings. This isn't just pottery or foundations. This is wealth, the kind of treasure that says civilization, that says kingship, that says everything Homer described was true. That evening, you write in your journal, "I found the treasure of Priam." You describe it in loving detail. You sketch some pieces, and you make a decision that will cause international scandal. You're going to smuggle it out of Turkey. The Ottoman government has rights to anything found on Turkish soil, but you tell yourself this transcends politics. This is Greek heritage, Homeric heritage. This belongs to the world, not to any one government. So over the next weeks, you'll hide the treasure in crates labeled as pottery samples. You'll bribe officials. You'll outright lie when necessary. And you'll succeed. The treasure will leave Turkey, end up in Greece, eventually in Germany, and after World War II, in Russia, where it remains to this day, still controversial, still contested. But tonight, in the lamplight, with gold spread across your table, and Sophia wearing one of the ancient diadems, you'll photograph her like this, a picture that will become famous. You allow yourself pure triumph. You found it. After 44 years of dreaming, 2 years of brutal excavation, and 1 morning of desperate theft, you found Troy's treasure. What you don't know yet, what will take decades of archaeological refinement to understand, is that you found the wrong Troy. The treasure you're holding comes from Troy II, a settlement that flourished around 2500 BCE. Homer's Troy, the city of the Trojan War, was Troy 6 or 7, built 1,000 years later. You're holding someone's treasure, certainly. Someone's precious hoard buried in crisis. But not Priam's. Not Helen's. Not the treasure from the story that brought you here. But that's a truth for another day. Tonight, you're victorious. Tonight, you've proven that Troy was real, that Homer wasn't lying, that the boy who held an illustrated book on Christmas morning was right to believe. The gold gleams on the table. Sophia's eyes shine. And somewhere beneath the earth, 9 cities sleep in layers, each one Troy, each one real, each one waiting to tell a more complicated truth than any poem could contain. You are standing in a museum in Athens, and the man looking at your treasure is not impressed. His name is Wilhelm Dörpfeld. He's 30 years your junior, and he's about to tell you something that will shake the foundation of everything you've accomplished. Around you, glass cases display the gold you smuggled from Turkey. Diadems, cups, weapons, all carefully labelled the treasure of Priam. The labels are your idea. The museum accepted the donation, accepted your interpretation. But this young German archaeologist is examining the artifacts with an expression you've learned to dread: scholarly skepticism. The stratigraphy doesn't match, he says quietly, almost apologetically. Herr Schliemann, I've reviewed your excavation notes, and the layer where you found this treasure, it dates to at least 1,000 years before the Homeric period. The words hit you like a physical blow. That's impossible. The pottery styles, the architecture, the metallurgical techniques, all of them indicate an earlier civilization. What you found is extraordinary, certainly, a magnificent Bronze Age hoard, but it isn't from the Troy of the Trojan War. You want to argue. You want to shout that he's wrong, that you know Troy when you see it, that you've devoted your life to this. But Dörpfeld isn't hostile. He's careful. He's done what you never quite did. He's studied the archaeological context methodically, compared it to other sites, dated it properly. And in his evidence, you can see the uncomfortable truth taking shape. The treasure you found was buried around 2500 BCE. The Trojan War, if it happened at all, occurred around 1200 BCE. You found a treasure, certainly. You found proof that Hisarlik was an important city with wealthy inhabitants. But you excavated so violently, so quickly, that you destroyed the very layer you were looking for, the late Bronze Age settlement that corresponds to Homer's era. You dynamited Priam's Troy to reach the older treasure beneath it. The realization is devastating, and yet... But I proved Troy existed, you say, and your voice is smaller than you want it to be. Dörpfeld's expression softens. You did, absolutely you did. Before you, everyone thought Homer was fiction. You proved there was a real city at Hisarlik, a series of real cities, one of which was inhabited during the Homeric period. That's an extraordinary achievement. But I destroyed it. You didn't preserve it as carefully as modern methods would require, no. You turn away, looking at the golden diadems glittering in their cases. You remember the morning you found them, the racing heart, the certainty. You remember Sophia wearing them by lamplight. You remember thinking, this is vindication, this is proof. And it was proof, just not the proof you thought it was. The scholarly community has been both kinder and crueler than you expected. In journals and conferences across Europe, your name is repeated constantly, sometimes with admiration for your determination and success, sometimes with horror at your destructive methods. Schliemann's Trench has become a cautionary term among archaeologists, a warning about what happens when enthusiasm outpaces methodology. Critics point out that you were a treasure hunter, not a scientist, that you cared more about vindicating Homer than understanding the full human story at Hisarlik, that your use of dynamite was archaeological vandalism, that you smuggled antiquities illegally, that you probably lied about details in your autobiography to make yourself seem more heroic. This last part is definitely true. Scholars have found multiple inconsistencies in your narratives, including whether that drunken miller really recited Homer, and whether your wife Sophia was even present when you found the treasure. And yet, without you, Troy would still be a myth. The scholarly consensus before your excavations was firm. Homer invented everything. The Iliad was beautiful poetry, not history. But you, a grocer's apprentice with no formal archaeological training, you refused to accept that. You believed when no one else would. And you were right enough to change archaeology forever. Frank Calvert visits you in Athens. He's older now, greyer, and there's something sad in his eyes when he looks at the treasure. I've been excavating at Hisarlik again, he tells you. The upper layers you destroyed, there's evidence there of late Bronze Age habitation, Mycenaean pottery, architecture that matches the Homeric period. So Troy 7, you ask? That's Homer's Troy? Possibly, or Troy 6. The chronology is complex. He pauses. But Heinrich, listen to me. You found Troy. Maybe you found the wrong layer. Maybe you used the wrong methods, but you found it. You proved it was real. Everything that comes after, the refined dating, the careful stratigraphy, the proper excavation techniques, all of that is only possible because you were brave enough, or mad enough, to start digging. That night, you stand at your window looking out over Athens, where ancient stones rise under moonlight, where every foundation stone is a reminder that old stories sometimes tell truth. You're 61 years old. Your dream has been both fulfilled and complicated. You found Troy, but you also destroyed some of it. You proved Homer was right, but you also proved you were wrong about which layer was which. Historians still argue about your legacy. Some call you the father of Mediterranean archaeology. Others call you a destructive amateur. Both are right. You were brilliant and reckless, visionary and blind, triumphant and tragic. You were a boy who believed in walls from a Christmas book, and you became the man who found them, even if they weren't quite the walls you thought they were. In the museum, the golden diadems shine. They're real. The treasure is real. Troy is real. And that, perhaps, is vindication enough, even if the truth is more complicated than the dream that carried you across 44 years and half the world to reach it. You are standing at the edge of Hisarlik, and what you are looking at is time made visible. It's 1890, 17 years after you found the treasure, and you've returned to the site with a more careful hand, a more humble heart. Wilhelm Dorpfeld is with you. The young archaeologist who corrected your chronology has become your colleague, your student, and in some ways, the son who will finish what you started. Together, you're examining what you now understand. Hisarlik isn't one Troy. It's 9 Troys, each built on the ruins of the last, rising and falling across 3,000 years like breath. Tell me again, you say to Dorpfeld. Explain it so I understand completely. He points to the lowest excavation level, where the bedrock finally appears. Troy 1, the earliest settlement, around 3000 BCE. Small, primitive, but already in this strategic location, controlling the Dardanelles. You nod. You can see the foundations. Simple stone walls barely 3 feet high. The remnants of a village that existed when Egypt was just beginning to unify, when Stonehenge was still being built. Troy 2, Dorpfeld gestures to the next layer up. 2500 BCE. This is where you found the treasure. A much larger city, wealthier, with sophisticated metalworking. Destroyed by fire. The treasure of Priam that wasn't Priam's treasure. You've made peace with that now. Mostly. Troy 3, 4, and 5. He's moving upward through the strata. Smaller settlements, less impressive. Perhaps the city declined for several centuries. The pottery changes, the architecture is cruder. Then he stops at a particular layer, and his voice changes, becomes more reverent. Troy 6, 1700 to 1250 BCE. Look at these walls, Heinrich. You look. And even now, even after years of seeing them, they take your breath away. Massive limestone blocks fitted together with extraordinary precision, rising at a slight angle in a technique that Mycenaean Greeks used for their own fortifications. These walls would have stood 20 feet high when they were complete, punctuated by towers, pierced by gates. This is fortress architecture of the highest order. This is Homer's Troy, Dortfeld says, or close to it, the city that existed during the late Bronze Age, contemporary with Mycenae and the other Greek kingdoms. The pottery we find here, Mycenaean imports showing trade with Greece, the scale of the fortifications, the evidence of wealth and power. This is the Troy that could have gone to war with a Greek coalition. But it wasn't destroyed by war, you say quietly, because you've learned this painful truth. It was destroyed by earthquake. Yes, around 1250 BCE, a massive earthquake brought down these magnificent walls. Troy 6 ended not with fire and slaughter, but with geological catastrophe. You're both silent, contemplating the irony. The city that could have been Homer's Troy was destroyed by the earth itself, not by Greek warriors. But there's more, Dortfeld continues, pointing to the next layer. Troy 7A. The survivors rebuilt immediately on the same site. Smaller houses, more crowded, evidence of crisis. And this level was destroyed by fire around 1180 BCE. Your heart quickens. War? Possibly. The chronology matches. The destruction by fire matches. If there was a historical Trojan War, this is the most likely candidate. Troy 7A, the hastily rebuilt city on the ruins of the earthquake-destroyed Troy 6. So Homer's Troy isn't one layer, it's two layers. A magnificent city destroyed by earthquake and its shabby, desperate successor burned by human hands. The truth is messier than the story. It's complicated by geology and chronology and the uncomfortable fact that real history never quite matches epic poetry. And above that, you ask? Troy 8 and 9, Greek settlements, then Roman. By the time the Romans controlled this area, Troy was famous as the city from Homer. Emperors visited, left offerings. But the city they were honoring was built on ruins of ruins of ruins. You walk to the edge of the excavation and look down at the 9 layers stacked like pages in a book. Each one represents centuries of human life. Children born, meals cooked, loves pursued, wars fought, earthquakes endured. Each one is a complete world, and you destroyed parts of all of them to reach the one you thought you were looking for. I was too violent, you say aloud, too impatient. Dortfeld doesn't disagree. You were, but you were also courageous. Before you, this was just a hill. Now we know it's the most important archaeological site in Turkey. Your methods weren't perfect. They were catastrophic. But your instinct was correct. And the work we're doing now, the careful stratigraphic excavation, the proper dating, it's only possible because you proved there was something here worth studying carefully. That evening, you sit in your tent, the same tent you've used for 20 years of excavations here, and write a letter to the German Archaeological Institute. In it, you acknowledge your mistakes. You advocate for more careful methodology. You recommend that future excavations at Troy be conducted with patience and precision, not dynamite and desperation. It's a kind of apology, though you don't use that word. And it's a passing of the torch. You're 68 years old now, your health is declining. You won't see the end of Troy's excavation. Scholars will still be digging here in the 21st century, still finding new layers, still debating which Troy is Homer's Troy, still uncovering the complicated truth beneath the simple story. But you started it. You, the boy who saw an illustrated book and refused to believe it was only imagination. You, the grocer's apprentice, who taught himself languages in stolen moments. You, the merchant who turned war into fortune and fortune into archaeology. You, with all your flaws and brilliance and stubborn certainty, you made Troy real again. The Turkish night settles over Hisarlik. Stars appear one by one above the excavation. The same stars that shone on all 9 Troys, on the people who built and destroyed and rebuilt this city across 3 millennia. And you sit in your tent, an old man now, surrounded by pottery shards and field notes and the accumulated evidence of a dream fulfilled. Imperfectly, catastrophically, but fulfilled nonetheless. Tomorrow, Dorpfeld will continue the excavation. After you die, in 4 years, in Naples, suddenly, of an ear infection that spreads to your brain, others will continue it. The work of understanding Troy, all 9 Troys, will go on without you. But tonight, in this moment, you allow yourself to feel what you've always felt since that Christmas morning in 1829. Wonder, profound, aching wonder at the fact that stories can be true, that ancient walls can wait patiently for someone to believe in them, that a boy's dream can reshape what the world knows about its own past. The walls of Troy stand in the darkness, fragmentary, complicated, real. You found them. Not gently, not carefully, but you found them. And in the end, perhaps that's enough. Let the excavation dust settle now. Let the gold diadems rest in their cases. Let Heinrich Schliemann, flawed, brilliant, obsessive Heinrich, fade into the gentle distance where all dreamers eventually go. You've walked beside him from childhood wonder to merchant wealth to that desperate morning in a Turkish trench, and now it's time to let the story soften into something you can carry into sleep. Troy was real. That's the luminous truth at the heart of everything. For 3,000 years it was just poetry, just myth, just a beautiful lie that Homer told. And then one man, one stubborn, imperfect man, refused to accept that, and he tore open a hillside until the ancient walls confessed. He destroyed some of what he sought. He dated things wrong. He smuggled treasures and used methods that make modern archaeologists wince. But he proved that sometimes, just sometimes, the stories we tell in the darkness are trying to tell us something true. The walls are still there, you know, at Hisarlik in northwestern Turkey, overlooking the Dardanelles. 9 cities stacked in layers, stone on stone on stone, each layer a human story, each story real. Tourists visit now. Archaeologists still excavate, carefully, patiently, learning from Schliemann's mistakes. And the wind that blows across that hill carries the scent of time and sea salt and 3,000 years of human persistence. Close your eyes now. Feel that wind. Imagine standing on ancient walls while the Aegean glitters in the distance. And remember that the truths buried in our world, in history, in each other, in yourself, they're waiting, patiently waiting, for someone brave enough or mad enough to start digging. For someone who looks at what everyone calls impossible and whispers quietly but firmly, I believe. Troy was real, the walls were real, and dreams, when you hold them long enough, can become geography. Sleep well. The ancient stones are keeping watch tonight, as they've kept watch for millennia, solid and patient under the stars.